Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Core Match gameplay. This time around we are in Gorgazon, playing as the fair and balanced Vampire Coast against the forces of fair Brettonia. And this is a match where, oddly enough, Brettonia doesn't struggle as much as you'd expect. Obviously, Brettonia usually has issues with big monsters, and things like cannons can kind of dumpster their cavalry, but Brettonia does have a few tricks up its sleeve. Dirt cheap peasant bowmen can really overwhelm the zombie trash, and Royal Hippogriffs, Pegasus Knights, and to an extent, lords like Lewin, big lords, honestly even someone, well, I wouldn't say Bordello, maybe that's being a little generous, but especially Lewin can definitely lay the smackdown on a lot of the big stuff that the Tomb Kings can bring, or the Vampire Coast can bring, and at the same time they can survive things like cannons and long-range artillery relatively well. So, what I decided to do here was take a build that could, well, be absolutely terrible to face off against. For our lord, we do have Colostra Deerfin. She is, of course, wonderfully positioned here on top of her Rotting Leviathan. This little crab is quite the beast in melee. 150 armor, basically an Arachnarch spider without poison and more defensively oriented is what I'd sum it up as. He obviously has expert charge defense, which is pretty nuts if you manage to brace. And with Colostra, you actually get 10% physical resist, which is kind of cool. I figured that against Brettonian Cav, though, this Death Ball would be very effective with Colostra because she does have this ability here, Song of Enthrallment, which reduces enemy speed by 48%, which will make it very difficult for things like Pegasus Knights, Royal Hippogriffs even, Lewin, and all that sort of stuff to escape, especially if I'm dropping zombie summons or Promethean summons alongside that. We also do have Ghost of the Past, of course, to get our free Knights Errant summon. We have Arcane Conduit. I did bring Kraken Spool, looking to potentially pull some, no pun intended, some slowing shenanigans. We do have Fog of the Damned for the AoE melee attack and leadership debuff, and then Denizens of the Deep because summon spam is great. We also did bring Kiss of the Deep, which means that whenever I'm casting, I'm going to cause some damage on the map. I wanted to try it out and see just how much it actually does. Besides that, we do have a Vampire Fleet Captain of Vampires. He does have, or she does have, Invocation of the Neck, Drowned Dead, and Taunt, and she is mounted on Rotting Promethean to be a little better protected alongside these big Leviathans. So the poor little Hermit Crab here, sitting alongside its much bigger friends. The Rotting Leviathan over here is going to provide some additional stopping power. Like I said before, it's very difficult for Brettonia to deal with big stuff. Hippogriffs and Lewin can counter it pretty heavily, but with all the debuffs going down and mobs of summons and cannon fire, we might be able to pull it off. For our front line, it's simply a whole bunch of zombie-powered deckhands with the Tide of Skuld in the middle, some pole arms on the peripheries defending the guns. We did bring 2 Carronates to shut down true cavalry, so things like Grail Knights, Knights of the Realm, Knights Errant, they get dumpstered pretty heavily by Carronates. And obviously this will also let me counter battery things like Trebuchets. If my opponent brought those, it can apply some pressure to Royal Hippogriffs, Blue, and that sort of stuff. We also do have 3 units of Scurvy Dogs here to pressure backlines a little bit, as well as to provide a little bit of extra protection. They can potentially keep things like Royal Hippogriffs pinned on the ground, which would be very nice. For my opponent, he decided to go very, very wide here. Front line entirely of peasants. You can see 6 units of them backed by 4 units of Spearmen at Arms, the unshielded variant. Then there are 4 Battle Pilgrims, one of which is the Regiment of Renown Holy Wardens, 2 Peasant Bows with fire arrows, a Damsel of Life with Earthblood, Shield of Thorns, Regrowth, and Awakening of the Wood, as well as Life Bloom. There's surprisingly no Power Stone, and she did bring the Aura of the Lady, which I think is a bit wasted here. There's also a unit of Grail Knights to provide some additional anti-large and run down squishy troops, and King Lewin, of course, with the Shield of Corone, Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, Beloved Son of Brettonia, and Ladies Champion. So all in all, very solid, and Royal Hippogriff Knights in there as well. Surprisingly, no Sword of Corone, which is a very odd choice, and no Power Stone with all those spells is a bit odd. But besides that, this build will definitely see it's very wide, which is actually kind of an issue. I didn't go that wide with this composition. There's only 4 units in the front, and then although there's a bunch of stuff in the back, we're going to struggle to beat these Battle Pilgrims. My opponent could potentially swarm all over me, get on my guns, and be an absolute menace. That said, I wanted to keep the fight away from my guns as long as possible, so we are going to push in here, just push straight into my opponent, right down the pipe with our big boys. And the cannons have been turned off fire will, so they're not shooting at the moment. That means my opponent is not managing to really get much value out of these peasant mobs and absorbing charges. The peasants just get run over, and they're going to get wrecked by the zombies too. Peasants are pretty god-awful. And we're pushing straight through to the backline, going after those tasty archers. And looking to get through to them. And you can see already the terror house kicking off for the peasant mobs. Because we're behind them, we're just plowing straight through and getting on top of these peasants, and the fire arrows are not going to hold too long. Meantime, the Grail Knights over here getting chipped away at by those guns and losing model after model, just getting torn to shreds by those cannonballs from the zombie guns, and definitely not where they want to be in life. They've already lost almost a third of their force before they've even managed to meet the line. Now my opponent here is going to drop in against my Vampire Fleet Captain of Vampires, which is pretty clever. The Vampire Fleet Captain obviously does have heals. He's isolated here and alone against away from Claustra and the Leviathan, and I'm going to be forced to fall back and try to reinforce him. And so that's what we're going to do here, collapsing in on Louis. We're going to pop the Song of Enthrallment to provide some defensive buffs, and then summon in some Zombie Pirate deckhands to tie him down. And looking to womp on his rear here. And of course, Claustra does hit like a truck. Unfortunately for me, though, my opponent is casting Awakening of the Wood, which is going to slow me down, but it also slows Louis down to a grand total of 10 speed, which is pretty sad. In the meantime, the Damned Knights Errant do get summoned, and they are going to be looking to run over the Peasant Bows. So a bit of thematic gameplay here. We are getting the Summon of the Damned Knights to overrun the forces of Fair Brettonia, and of course, Damned Knights Errant. This was a bit of a risk. I was sorely tempted to bring a Paladin to go full on into the anti-Brettonia strat, but decided against it because the Paladin would be so bad against Grail Knights if you end up having to meet them. Unfortunately for my opponent, those Grail Knights get completely dumpstered down to 8 miles because of that cannon fire, and they are forced to reconsider their life decisions and flee. In the meantime, the Damned Knights Errant running down the Peasant Bows with fire arrows, removing them from play and massacring them very effectively. And really, this is kind of all I really want them to do. They don't have much of another purpose here. They're not going to do much to the Royal Hippogriff Knights. They're not going to do a great job against anything else here, so get the Peasant Bows off the field. The infantry they could do okay against, but especially the Holy Wardens, they do terrible against those. So what can you do? In the meantime, though, the Rotting Leviathans, despite being peppered down and all that sort of stuff, are holding up pretty strong, and we are able to overrun these troops. In the backline, Louis does decide to get a little cheeky, but he is finding himself on the receiving end of some gunfire, and the cannons, despite whiffing at point blank in pretty pitiful fashion, are making a few connections and making Louis feel a bit sad. Anytime I read, the Grail Knights do commit, but they're now down to just 8 miles, and they are losing HP at a prodigious rate, so they're not going to be able to do very much shortly. They're going to fall apart. And elsewhere, you know, this Death Ball here is still doing well. And here I was trying to snare this Damsel of Life, pick her off, hoping my opponent was not paying attention. She is mounted surprisingly, I think, is that a barded warhorse? I think it's a barded horse. That might be wrong. Maybe it's just a horse. But we do try to clock her. We do actually whiff, which is kind of sad. Claustra has pretty good melee stats. You would think that she'd hit, but nope. Apparently that 22 melee defense holding strong, and the damsel escapes. So, bit of some rough stuff, but we are able to remove these Peasant Bows from play. And all in all, my opponent's force now completely routed off to the 4 corners of the earth. That said, he is still pushing through. The Battle Pilgrims, of course, are not going to rout that easily. Battle Pilgrims, an incredibly potent force when it comes to dealing with trash. That's one of the few really great niches of Battle Pilgrims, just dumpstering chaff. And I do think this is actually one of the matchups where Battle Pilgrims can really shine, is against Vampire Coast, because Vampire Coast tends to bring so much trash troops that you can just overrun. And regardless, the March of the Drowned does continue, and Claustra is coming in to get revenge on King Louis. Not satisfied with the fact that she got drowned off the coast of Ulthuan. She's coming back in, looking to clock him over the head. And Louis, though, well, he's running away, but he still has a lot of HP. He left about 1,700, and he's going to dive in on this Carronade and look to take it out, which is a bit unfortunate for me. These Carronades still have a lot of ammo. If I could keep them firing, especially against the heavy hitters my opponent has, the Damsel, the Hippos, Lewin, that would be ideal. But my opponent does dive in here, and he's going to start beating up on the crew, which kind of sucks. That said, this Carronade over here is just going to pivot around and start shooting it. Of course, this is the one benefit of zombie crews. They never rout, so even though these things are going god-awful for me, I'm going to be able to keep firing, and I'm going to be able to keep Lewin tied down. He can't really ditch this place because the Carronade would start shooting at him again. And you can see the cannonballs there at point blank, shooting him and doing a lot of damage there. A couple hundred, 400 or so damage done in the space of just a few seconds. Carronades do quite a lot of damage, almost 400 a shot. So Louis, even with all his physical resist and missile resist, I think he's up to, like, yeah, 35%, still vulnerable. Elsewhere in the meantime, we're going to get a summon of Rotting Prometheans to bog down these Battle Pilgrims, looking to tie them down and buy us some time as we chase after Louis. I was desperately trying to kill the king off here so that my opponent would no longer have those that annoying support, because Louis, of course, annoying hero sniper. He could potentially still snipe off my lords. He could cycle charge me to death, especially alongside those hippos, and I really don't want that happening. At this point, the balance of power is shifting decisively in our favor, but the model count does not support that. My opponent still has 700 more troops or so than me, maybe like 650. He's only lost about 700, whereas I've lost a solid, well, 1,000. The vast majority of my army is gone, despite summons and all that sort of stuff, trying to keep him in the fray. And my opponent is starting to do pretty well here. He's definitely whittling me down. But one of the big benefits for us, big but there, one of the things still going for us is this hero mob. And that is definitely the big gimmick of this army, is that we've got this hero mob. And if your opponent doesn't bring the best composition to counter it, potentially this can do a lot of work. These Leviathans are pretty potent, and we're going to be able to jump in here and start stomping all over these spearmen. This guy up to 100 kills, Claustra up to only 44, that's actually not that much. The Vampire Fleet Captain on 24. The cannon here firing away, whittling Louis down, getting him down to 1600, so I guess he's regened quite a lot. Over here, the Tiger's Guild getting jumped by the Royal Hippogriffs, who are kind of wasting their time though. Sure, they're going to do a lot of damage and not take much in return, but they're wasting their time. They're really need to be over here getting rid of this gun, and in the meantime the Carronade is going to start pivoting to start engaging those hippos, and you can see the shots flying in and going to start clocking those guys over the head. Anytime, although Louis does try to dive in here, we do hit him with a taunt, weakening him and making him much less effective at combat, and as he tries to flee, he's going to take quite a bit of a pounding, so he's down to 1400 now, and we're definitely doing alright. In the meantime, we're going to cast another Song of Enthrallment. It's very cool that this spell is just constantly on off cooldown. It's a very ability. It's a very good ability in my opinion. It does give you. It's only got 90 seconds of cooldown, 22 seconds duration, so very very potent, and it slows everything by almost 50%. So my opponent finally mismicros the damsel, gets her too close. Probably trying to keep her in here for leadership purposes. We do manage to clock her over the head, but it's not really going to do that much. In the meantime, over here, the Royal Hippos are diving in on the Rotting Leviathan, trying to do some damage, perhaps trying to bog down the cannon crew as well, and kind of succeeding, but the Vampire is coming in, and the Leviathan is standing strong. Leviathan, of course, no pushover in melee, 42 melee defense against the 54 melee attack of the Hippos. They've actually almost gained a chevron here. But definitely we're able to beat them up. Now, one of the cool things going off right now is the fact that my opponent has had his King buff proc. So his beloved son of Brettonia has popped. You almost never see this go off, but because he's so low on HP right now, he's under 50%. He's actually giving all of his troops a passive frenzy. And I think it actually doubles up the frenzy on the Holy Wardens, which is pretty nuts. You get both the beloved son as well as frenzy. So yeah, the Holy Wardens are pretty nuts right now. They've got 24% more damage, plus 16 melee attack. And even these peasants sitting at 28 melee attack with that, so pretty crazy stuff. But the Hippogriffs do lose the model and are forced to reconsider their life decisions, which is very important. Right now, the Carronade staying alive is absolutely critical. We are able to reman the guns here, dropping a heck on them, keep the crew alive. As long as the guns stay alive, the crew can be healed, which is really important. We're going to start bringing troops back from the dead and start chipping away at my opponent. And although he has gotten these troops through to the back line, he's going to try to push in now. We're going to be able to pull the Carronades away and then pile in with our troops. And our mob of heroes here is just so potent. These poor Holy Wardens really stand no chance. And my opponent's starting to come into a very grim predicament against this horde of undead Brettonians. So obviously, he is trying to collapse on me. He's trying to surround me, but he's running out of options. He's got the Hippogriffs here, very badly beaten up. They're very low on HP, 3,700 or so. But you can see my opponent did get some sort of cast off, healing off, so these guys are healing a little bit. He does get him with an Earth Blood, which is going to help as well. One of the cool things about Hippos is they don't tend to bleed that much models. They've only lost one so far, and lost over half their HP at one point. But my opponent is probably almost out of Winds of Magic at this stage. He has casted some Shield of Thorns over the course of this game. He's casted some Awakening of the Woods. And at this point, things are definitely looking grim, and he doesn't really have the healing left. So he's going to try to commit with his Royal Hippogriffs, but we are making sure to keep some of our troops in position to sort of defend, which is a bit of a problem right now, because we are basically out of chaff. And so we're kind of trying to keep a protection on our Carronade, because the Carronade is so important, while at the same time zoning away my opponent's infantry and keeping them off me. And you can see at this point, Sign Empire is basically gone. We're down to our less than 200 models. Over here, Claustra getting gooned by Lewin and his gang, but fortunately, of course, my opponent does not have the Sword of Corone, which means no buffs for him, or no debuffs for him. And we are going to be able to surround these Royal Hippos and start whomping on them. And you can see they're just getting dumpstered, losing hundreds of HP. Sure, there's some heals going on, but it's just nowhere near enough. And they're really not able to hold. And you can see they're losing down to about 50% HP. It's now less, losing models. They lose another Hippogriff, another Brave Son of Brettonia going down. And they're still in the sights of this Carronade. And the Carronade is going to be able to keep whittling them down as they try to flee. Whiffs a shot there because these guys did turn around. One of their buddies is still stuck in melee down here, so they're not able to get back in, but the Carronade keeps womping, and these guys trying to bleed, and you can see the balance of power now shifting in our favor. Lewin almost out of his healing cap. And my opponent's army at this point just reduced to a handful of battle pilgrims and spearmen. And obviously the peasant trash is not going to be able to hold up. If we can get rid of Lewin and the hippos, or at least cripple them, this trash is just going to rout. Their leadership will collapse. And of course most of these troops are expendable, which means their leadership is interlocking. So if we can start routing the one peasant mob, chances are the spears and the bows will also go as well. And well, my opponent does get on top of my carronade here, again, simply due to some bad micro on my part. We're able to get on these battle pilgrims, start whomping on them, and force them off and save the guns. So that's the most important part here. Keep the carronade alive. If we can keep the carronade alive, we can win this game. If we can't, well, we're probably going to lose. Well, maybe not at this point. At this point, it's starting to come more and more into my favor. Over here, we are going to start crumping on these guys. Arcane Conduit going down with the Claustre. We do get another symbol of zombie pirates looking to zone out this trash. Claustre being gooned by Louis and his gang. My opponent, of course, taking advantage of that mobility edge he has to dive in. And you know, Claustre's able to really lay the smackdown on these guys. These guys down to less than 2,000 HP. My opponent no longer really has the healing. The Royal Hippos, less than 2,000, getting focused pretty heavily. Claustre taking quite a bit of a beating herself, now at about half HP. But still, she is now at over 100 kills. Doing some amazing work here, and the Hippos are just bleeding hard. And they're down to 4 models, only 1,300 HP left. Doing their very best, trying to get in there, trying to help protect their king, and sort of finish this game. Potentially, if they can get rid of Claustre, maybe they can just barely pull it off. But Claustre does pop her Song of Enthrallment, tantalizing these poor knights with her wonderful songs there, and is able to just force them off. Lewin here, fleeing for dear life, trying to avoid that siren song, and Hippogriffs down to 3 models, less than 1,000 HP, losing now down to 2 models. And forced to reconsider their life decisions. The carronade now back online, once again, fleeing back into safer position. And at this point, my opponent's army is simply going to rout. Lewin there taking another slap from Claustre, who's still on over 2,000 HP. Keep in mind, it looks really bad for her, but she's over 2,000 HP. At this point, it's going to be a full shatter for Brettonia. So, a Pyrrhic victory for the Drowned. So, it was a bit of a fun match. Obviously, the build I brought, I think, is all right against Brettonia. If you're expecting these sorts of builds with hippos and lords like Lewin, or with Lewin, or Fey Enchanters, but maybe some paladins and that sort of stuff, this build's okay because you can kind of go toe-to-toe with them in melee. If they try to cycle charge you and be annoying that way, you can slow them down and make sure you get some hits in with Claustre's effect. And over time, just kind of out-attrition your opponent. And of course, with the cannons, you can whittle down things like Grail Knights and Royal Hippogriffs. In retrospect, perhaps the cannons were not the best investment, though. Perhaps I could have ditched one of the cannons in exchange for some, and perhaps ditched the Scurvy Dogs as well, at least 1 unit of them. Maybe freed up some slots for like 2 units of handguns. Instead, had the carronade and then 2 guns, and that might have been a better investment for dealing with the hippos and Lewin. But besides that, the build worked out okay. Now, obviously for my opponent, the peasants didn't do very much, but pilgrims did amazing. I think pilgrims are a great choice in this match. Peasant bows are also an amazing choice, but not when you only have 2 of them. When you only have 2, it's way too easy to shut down. I kind of just stomped them with Claustre and the Vampire Fleet Captain and the Rotting Leviathan and ran him over. And my opponent kind of got shafted there. As for my opponent's build, my main critique would be really just... well, personally I prefer Faye to Lewin in this matchup, but that's personal taste. You can't make Lewin run. But I think, 1, you don't need that many spells on your caster. Just bring whatever you're going to use. You probably want heals to keep your goon squads in play. And get Louis this sort of Couronne. You want that debuff. Finally, I don't think those peasants are all that useful, especially if you're not going to surround your opponent and try to get into his backline with the peasants. If my opponent had been trying to use his peasants, this isn't... When you're dealing with Vampire Coast, any good Vampire Coast player is not just going to waste his cannon shots on your peasants. So they're not really useful for actually soaking up fire. Now, sure, they could soak up some gunfire, but you're better off just overwhelming your opponent with arrow fire. And the peasants, they're not going to soak up charges all that much. There's not that many things for the counts or the coast to bring that charges. Now, sure, you can. This is a pretty melee-heavy build for me, but I'm not relying on my charge bonuses all that much. And I'm not doing my charge bonuses do almost nothing for me. So it's more about just punching through, and I just run them over and terror out them. So I think you're better off ditching the peasants. It frees up another 600 gold that you can use on for better things like more archers. I also don't think Grail Knights are very good here. I think Grail Knights are just too susceptible to cannon fire, and either I'd go with cheaper cav or probably paladins. Honestly, paladins are just better. They give you some extra anti-large oomph, and they're much less susceptible to all sorts of shooting. So I think that's pretty important. Regardless, well played with my opponent Avalok here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun to watch some Vampire Coast gameplay, or I guess the drowned gameplay. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to post them, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.